Hello everyone. Today I just wanted to share my thoughts. I was outside doing a meditation and it was overcast and I thought, the sun seems to be hidden today. The point of meditation really is to keep us grounded and to connect with our true self in almost a dreamlike state during the day, which is why we close our eyes. It's also why in some cultures they do hymns and syllables in order to better vibrate with their higher self and reach a state of peace and contentment. It was so interesting though that once I surrendered myself, these suns seemed to appear and distinguish light from darkness. They say that the shadow, or as Jung calls it, the shadow, is our lower self, our hidden self. I thought, isn't it only interesting that you can perceive the shadow when the sun is present? When there is light, you can discern your shadow. You can discern your bad thoughts and your bad habits, but only in a certain time frame. And it's interesting because in that overcast weather, I thought, how can we discern good from evil? Or how can I find the light within myself to discern what my bad habits are? And I think more and more this world of relativism, of subjectivity, of, nothing's really wrong, it's just another's perspective, seems more and more like a gray, overcast day where darkness can move unhindered. And I realize in that moment, while we have the divine which we can reach out to and call on for help, it is also part of that design that we can manifest the light within ourselves. And being able to see the inner light, to see the inner sun, and to be the inner self are all components that we are called to do. Because I'm reminded of the passage between Christ and a Roman soldier at the beginning of Matthew, where the soldier comes to him and says, well, if you're the Lord God and you come around healing people, surely you can come to my house and heal my sick daughter. And Jesus says, truly I can do this, but there are many people. And the soldier says, truly there are many people. But if one believes in the God, and one believes in you, then she is already healed by my intention for it to happen. And it's the one time when Jesus was actually astonished at someone else's doctrine or idea. And he said, truly, you are a true believer then. And of course, the soldier goes home and finds his daughter fully recovered. It's a lesson in what is realistic for us to manifest, but also the fact that One of the principles of manifestation is to think that it is already there. It is already present, and it is already manifested if your belief is strong enough. As it's also said, faith the size of a mustard seed can move a mountain. And I find for myself, as our moods and our conditions oscillate on a weekly or monthly or yearly basis, we forget that semblance of peace and truth and love, which is why we have things like church to remind us of these things. If people were not so quick to forget, you would not have the heresy of the early Israelites in the desert worshiping a golden calf when God had saved them over a dozen times just in the same few short months. They had already turned their back on him. And if you could only listen to the Bible once and just take the full meaning of it and just ingrain it into yourself and not forget, we wouldn't need to go to church. We wouldn't need to be reminded of the obvious tenets of nature and of the divine. What it made me think is that I want to be able to retain and manifest those ideas and that state of mind over a period of time, because truly enlightenment is just knowing that there is light within you and that you can manifest that light within you to see clearly in all things. And the best way to remember things seem to be through symbols or through music. And the symbol of the cross is the most basic, most simple kind of symbol that really can encapsulate that entire doctrine and that state of peace. And it's funny because another distinction I thought of was that I was anxious because I didn't know what kind of video to make, and I had other chores to do, and I just was stuck in this kind of paralysis. And I thought a state of peace isn't what I need in order to be productive. But here I am filming this video, and here I am being productive, and the state of peace is almost a byproduct, or maybe it's a prerequisite. I'm not entirely sure. But when I address the underlying anxieties, and I had cleansed my mind just by focusing on the good things I want to happen and I want to manifest, all of the negative things just fell away, and I found myself at peace to work without anxiety. And so perhaps that kind of regular peace is a solution to the modern anxiety of work and relationships and everything else that bombards us in a open information society. And it was so strange that in that moment the sun also manifested its warmth and light on this last few days of summer. And so I think another thought that I came across is that more so for men than women, the ability to deal with doing actions we don't want to do is fairly difficult. Men are more so beings of actions and of responsibility, and being able to manifest a state of peace does not sound like a productive tenant for a man to hold. But really, it's kind of like when we're working, or even when we're playing games or whatever, or out in a social engagement. It's like all of those anxieties and all those underlying thoughts are allowed to run amok. And they kind of pester and disturb the waters around us. And if they're not dealt with, we think we can just power through, and as you should always power through and do your best and not let these little things annoy you. But in an attempt to rid myself of an unproductive mindset, I entered a state of peace in which my productivity could finally engage itself, which is not what I had intended at all, and yet it works. So perhaps that's my practical takeaway. And I think more so than not, we need a religion or mindset for men. I think for women, generally, it's important to manifest a state of peace and well-being mentally. And for men, it's important to instate a state of purpose and respect for one's work or actions or hobbies. And I think my revelation is that the axiom between these 2 points of being is just the state of the peaceful mind that allows us to be productive or to be in a state of ideal resonance with the universe. And it's a criticism that I've not argued, but I've held with many of the Eastern religions, which is that they hold themselves in a sort of stationary position, that the world revolves around you and you can't manifest anything into it. You can only extinguish your desires and kind of be as water and flow along with it. And that was never something that ever appealed to me, because other parts of the world want to strive for something greater and strive for the divine, to go beyond our normal limits. And not just be content with the peace of the universe, but to create our own universe. And I think that these 2 things might actually be the same thing, that you cannot manifest or begin to engage with the construction of a new universe in which things are easier or more important and purposeful but it comes about by creating first a state of peace. And I think the whole point of manifesting a greater world is to create a world which makes sense, which reflects our values, and ultimately, when everything is taken care of and in line with nature and the universe, it does create peace in turn. It always reminds me of all of the iniquities of the world, how people complain about whatever kind of global, uncontrollable issue which is current at the moment, whether it be war or the climate or some kind of tragedy. Things that we have no control over, or things how they should be different in order that those things would never occur, Sometimes it's best to think, what if we did live in a perfect world? And all of the inconsistencies and ignorance of other people actually resonated with us, and things were in the best possible state they could be. What would you do then? How would you act differently? And you realize if you can manifest this world of the ideal into yourself, you can begin acting as if you do live in that world and project it outwards. And that peace, I'd like to think, is as infectious as the opposite of it, which might be random hatred or chaos. And that peace is just as, if not more so, addictive and spreadable. I think I'll go into how to meditate in another video, but I just kind of wanted to share that my revelation is that you want to imagine the sun within you. Even if it's dark outside, even if it's the middle of winter, you want to imagine the inner sun or the inner self, and you want to manifest that energy. If you're stressed out, if you're overworked, if you have an idea that you've been wanting to do that you know you can do, and you know if you do it, it's not going to be perfect or exactly how you want, but if you take a moment and focus on yourself and meditate and hum and reach a state of resonance with the divine, and you visualize a divine symbol like a wheel or a cross, or both, you'll reach a state where you realize just how empty your anxieties are. And suddenly, when all of those nuisances and doubts and the shadow just fall away from the light that you can generate within yourself, everything becomes so easy. And suddenly, you can manifest whatever is in your power. Anyway, that's the end of that. And as always, God bless.